profusely apologize for this delay in today's session. This is the first breakout session of the summit and will deal with manpower development, skilling in maritime sector. I have with myself Mr. Sharda Prasad. Mr. Sharda Prasad is he's the co-convener for the session. Mr. Has a very long association with us and with other departments of Government of India, and is an expert in skill development. He has worked with Ministry of Labour and has initiated a develop technical skills in the youth that is needed for our labor market. He has worked as advisor for skill development in the Sagarmala project for almost 5 years in the ministry and has just demitted the office. We could not have a better co-convener to discuss and analyze skill development issues in Government of India. I have a very distinguished panel, some very good friends in the panel. Just before they speak, but to give an overview of the panel, we have Skill Development of Government of India, Dr. Mahendra Nath Pandey. We have President of World Maritime University, Dr. Cleopatra. We have Vice Chancellor of Indian Maritime University, Dr. Malini Shankar. We also have Mr. Per Eric Dallin, who is CEO AKPAS of Norway. Somehow, Mr. Thomas Ting, the Chief Technology Officer of MPA, could not join us, so we would be missing him today in the panel. We have Mr. Madhu Nair, who is Chairman and Managing Director of Cochin Shipyard Limited. And we have Captain T.S. Ramanujam, who is Chief Officer of Logistics Sector Skill Development Council at Chennai in India. So welcome. Of speakers that we have today. Before we move to our esteemed panelist, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what happened. I just wanted to give a brief overview of the training and skill development. We have, as of now, around 450,000 registered seafarers, and in any given year, around 234,000 seafarers take active duty. We have 55 institutes, and at that we have 6 different centers of university. Around 12,000 graduates every year in various subjects in maritime field. We also get around 8,000 to 9,000 people who retire from active service every year. There is, in Indian context, a need to improve training for the existing seafarers. There is also a need to improve the skills of the active seafarers, especially at the ratings level. There is an urgent need now that the shipping itself is moving towards digitization and automation and latest environmental protection technology. There is a need to train our seafarers for the future requirements in shipping. There is, of course, also a need to create a larger maritime knowledge pool other than the knowledge in seafaring, where we are doing fairly well. It is the other domain like maritime law, maritime finance, insurance, uh, ocean governance, ocean development, ocean technology. These are the areas where we will need more manpower as we expand our footprint in the blue economy. There is, of course, a worldwide need to reskill and upskill the existing fishermen and have more modern fisheries. And of course, other than shipping and port, the logistics value chain requires skilling of a host of a large number of people who are employed with little skill or underdeveloped skill. The eminent panelists of today will cover, I suppose, all these issues in their respective speeches or PowerPoints. Without taking any more time, I would like to introduce our first speaker, the Honorable Minister, Dr. Mahendra Nath Pandey. Mr. Mahendra Nath Pandey is and is an Indian politician who is serving as Minister for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship of India. He has also served as Union Minister of State for Ministry of Human Resource Development, Minister of State for Housing and Urban Development, and also Minister of State for Planning, Independent Charge, and Minister of State for Panchayati Raj in his journey. We would uh, welcome the Honorable Minister with his inaugural speech. It seems we have a problem in connecting with the Honorable Minister. Uh, we have amongst us Dr. Cleopatra Dombia Henry. She is president of World Maritime University. She has 3 decades of professional and academic experience. Dr. Cleopatra is an international lawyer and is a global leader on maritime law, labor standards and labor law, and law of international organizations. She is a distinguished academic in the field of international law and an international advocate for sustainability and innovation. I'll be failing in my duty if I do not inform everyone that Dr. Cleopatra Domia Henry is the main force behind uh, the Maritime Labour Convention. And today, what we see as improvement in the stock of seafarers is largely due to her effort. I am not going to read out her uh, uh, CV anymore because everyone in the panel and everyone in the audience knows her very well and would be more willing to listen to her than me explaining things about her. Welcome, Dr. Cleopatra Dombia Henry.
Okay. Right, I'm unmuted. Thank you. Thank you very much, And let me begin by thanking Mr. Kumar for inviting me to be part of this panel. So Mr. Amitabh Kumar, Director General of Shipping, Mr. Shraddha Prasad, the advisor, Samalaga, Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways, Dr. Malini Shankar, who is the governor of WMU and also Vice Chancellor of the Indian Maritime University, Mr. Per Dallin, who is CEO of the Blue Maritime Cluster in Norway. Let me say all protocols observed, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. There are many trends that will impact the maritime industry already now and in the coming years. In the short time I have, I will address two of these very briefly and then comment on a few more. The first one relates to environmental sustainability and the stewardship of the planet. In recent times, it has become abundantly clear that we cannot continue to treat the oceans and the nature as a whole as we have always done, as a pristine and inexhaustible resource and supply of natural resources that can absorb the negative aspects of every operational activity undertaken on it without giving thought to its state and its sustainability. The oceans remain the basis of life, of all life, and global as well as national systems of governance and education have to shift from a paradigm which is exclusively seeking the exploitation of the ocean to one of sustainable stewardship and to use and the use of the ocean. This is perhaps the most important required paradigm shift of our times. It can be argued that the problems associated with the lack of stewardship, respect, protection, and sustainable use of the ocean in many jurisdictions arise from a lack of knowledge as well as appropriate education about the ocean and how humanity should interact with it. Maritime education, indeed all education, has a critical role to play in making this current generation and the ones to come appreciate not only cognitively, but also effectively the importance of good stewardship of the ocean, the natural environment in which the maritime industry operates. Decarbonization of shipping has been described by some as the single biggest issue the IMO has faced in its history. However, the specific technical issues are not the only issues regarding sustainability as a whole. The concept of greener shipping must be seen as relevant to all aspects of industry, from maritime education for sustainability through maritime law, insurance, shipbuilding, repair and operation, financing, regulation, logistics, port operations, bunkering, flag state and port state action, just to name a few. As I am sure no one in this audience will dispute, one area where there is significant change relating to trends in technological innovation and in the use of technology. In all spheres of human endeavor, new technology is making a big impact, and in some contexts, significantly widening societal gaps. With regard to this rapidly changing technological landscape and the globalization of the use of technology, education for the maritime sector should endeavor to impact knowledge and the right attitudes to develop a global maritime citizens who embrace innovation in keeping with fundamental human values and who ethically and use technology to advance global goals. This kind of development should not only focus on just educating tomorrow's industry actors and maritime leaders based solely on the past and present labor markets, but it must dynamically interrogate future possibilities to create opportunities for the beneficial use of technology and to find innovative solutions for the pressing needs of today and, of course, those anticipated in the future. Specific to education, while the traditional brick and mortar and face-to-face curriculum delivery methods, most of us are familiar with these, and they are still very much part of our daily existence and very much alive. One, however, continues to observe a distinctive intrusion into this traditional approach by technology, both in terms of teaching aids and in terms of the media that we use. This is particularly evident in the rise of e-learning, catalyzed as it has been by the COVID-19 pandemic. Maritime education and training cannot ignore these trends, but it must rise to the challenge of delivering well-skilled base and competency-oriented curriculum through e-learning to augment traditional teaching. The approach will also positively impact on another very important trend, that of lifelong learning. E-learning media allow for much of this and more than the traditional curriculum delivery methods, and will be particularly necessary when one notes the speed at which technology is changing developments across the industry. Among the other concerns that I wish to address, there are many of these other trends, which, though global in nature, will in some cases affect the maritime industry, perhaps disproportionately as compared to other sectors. They include economics, trade evolution, geopolitical shifts, including entrenchment or denial of the principles of globalization vis-a-vis nationalistic tendencies, gender equality, labor rights and labor movements, demographic shifts, as well as ethical and value shifts, among many others. All of these lead to what has been described as a global context in which volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity reign, making decision-making based on forecasting incredibly difficult, and in some cases, even impossible. The question is, what kind of education will support the diverse facets of maritime human resource management and development in this ever-changing global and even our national contexts? It is our view that the education for the future should definitely cover the technical competencies required in the multiple professional areas of the maritime sector, whether in respect of ship operations and therefore seafarers, or in areas such as maritime finance, shipbuilding, maritime and ocean governance. The technical competencies required must be based on well-grounded knowledge and skills. And of course, important and critical to the survival of the industry these elements. There are many previous and ongoing research efforts to understand what are the specific skills that will be needed for the medium to long term. For example, ship operations. The recent WMU major report on Transport 2040, Automation, Technology, Employment, the Future of Work, and the work that has been undertaken by the International Association of Maritime Universities on the notion of a global maritime professional are examples of what I have just referred to. I invite you to look at these at your convenience. Indeed, to achieve competence in any skill-based system requires different sectors of the maritime industry to work together. There should be adequate education and training that allows for an understanding of the specific issues that confront that particular area and the contemporary changes that are happening in that sector. However, above the specific technical skills needed for the maritime industry today and in the short term, there is the need for a new paradigm of education that seeks to engender learners a problem-solving mindset, critical thinking, resilience, adaptability, systems thinking, and collaboration, as opposed to the all too pervasive silo approach taken by the maritime actors. Just as important is the kind of education that fosters important skills of continuous learning. This is the kind of educational challenge WMU is engaged in confronting. Not only do we work to build competencies related to contemporary skills and to allow for carrying out today's work in the best possible way, we also seek to address these more fundamental issues in a way that allow our graduates to be optimal change agents and problem solvers in respect of the many global challenges. In this respect, WMU is a melting pot of ideas where countries send their future leaders to enhance the global discourse and to inform meaningful dialogue relating to the maritime and ocean issues and to advance optimum on-the-job performance in the various fields that we address. As the apex educational institution of the IMO, mandated to build capacity for the optimization of operations in the maritime industry and for the sustainable global stewardship of the oceans, among others, we at WMU are working to meet head-on the challenges that I have presented. Turning in my final comments to WMU and India, I am very happy to note that in working towards these goals, WMU already has a good partnership arrangement with India. We are very proud of our alumni of India, many of whom have truly excelled in their time at WMU. We currently have 2 of such alumni serving as members of our faculty at the university. In the past, India has endowed a professorial chair at the university. The university has had to date 224 Indian alumni with master's degrees in maritime affairs. Further, it is noted that the seminal idea, and I want to stress this because it really brings us all way back, the seminal idea that came before the establishment of the university, it came from no other, an Indian national, the former Secretary General of the IMO, Dr. C.P. Srivastava, during his long tenure of office for the IMO. He was the Secretary General. To quote him from his profile on our website, and I quote, "He was the inspired prime mover in the development of the concept of the World Maritime University, and in the immense job of planning, negotiating, fundraising, organizing, and implementation that was required to take a vision and turn it into a reality." End of quote. WMU certainly feels a bond with India. I wish to take this opportunity to invite India to continue and to indeed enhance its work with the university to deliver world impacting education, research, and capacity building. Together we are stronger. Together, and with education as the primary developmental tool, we can build the leaders of tomorrow, whether they are involved in national administration, in drafting our legislation, in shipbuilding, in human resource management, in education and training, in management of ships, just to name a few, and irrespective of age, nationality, and gender, who will have an appreciation of the current issues, who will develop the ability to respectfully but critically interrogate the different perspectives and elicit and analyze diverse opinions and create a network of ongoing international dialogue, which more than ever today we need. Let me thank you for extending to me this opportunity to be part of this very important conference. My best wishes for the optimal development of Indian maritime and ocean sectors. Given her international standard, India's well-being and values-based growth will no doubt benefit the entire global community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cleopatra Doumbia Henry, President of World Maritime University. Honorable Minister Dr. Mahendranath Pandey has joined us. Before I invite him to speak, there is a small film which we wanted to show to the audience in respect of Indian seafarers and maritime training and education. May I request the FICCI team to play the film?
Oceans have always had a special place in Indian culture and civilization. Merchant ships today are harbingers of prosperity and progress. These moving monuments of the high seas require people of indomitable courage, high caliber, and outstanding capabilities to maneuver them. We have close to 450,000 registered seafarers, out of which 250,000 Indian seafarers are employed overseas, manning some of the world's largest ships. Our seafarers operate specialized and modern vessels, including state-of-the-art container ships, oil, chemical, and gas tankers. Indian seafarers are the most sought after the world over. India has 155 maritime training institutes and 6 campuses of the Indian Maritime University, which imparts training in accordance with STCW Convention. To encourage the participation of Indian women in the maritime sector, DG Shipping has taken various proactive steps, such as providing scholarships and financial assistance for lady cadets at the training institutes. The number of seafarers is continually expanding, with growth of 17% on a year-on-year basis since 2014 onwards. In addition to putting in their best as key workers during the COVID pandemic, it was also essential for our seafarers to not only demonstrate continued professional competence, but also constantly upgrade their professional capabilities in compliance with STCW Convention requirements. Taking cognizance of the guidance provided in Section B16 of the STCW Convention regarding training, using distance learning and e-learning, DG Shipping took the lead and introduced a first-of-its-kind three-tier e-certification mechanism. The three-tier mechanism comprised completion of the course through an e-learning module, covering all competencies of each course through theory, animation, voice instructions, and chapter-wise assessment, followed by virtual classes conducted by the Maritime Training Institute, MTI, and a centralized online exit examination. E-proctoring and facial photo recognition systems features have been incorporated to ensure a fair and foolproof assessment process. Successful completion of these three tiers module leads to generation of digitally signed e-certificates from the course in charge and the principal of MTI. The e-governance system of the Directorate till date has issued 115,000 e-certificates to the seafarers following the three-tier system. India is the pioneering country which has put in place such a robust and effective mechanism during this challenging pandemic scenario. With the induction of new technology in the shipping sector, there is a need of upskilling. Maritime India Vision 2030 aims at enhancing the skills of seafarers to enable them to handle advanced electronics and information systems. Knowledge cluster has been envisioned for multidisciplinary research in maritime affairs and blue economy. It is time for global shipping companies, ports, and offshore organizations to anchor in India for knowledge, training, growth, and a future that the high seas beckon. Invite you to arrive, anchor, and explore the ocean of possibilities which our nation, India, has to offer.
Thank you. We have amongst us Honorable Minister Dr. Mahendra Nath Pandey. Dr. Pandey is an Indian politician serving as Minister for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship of India. He has also served as Union Minister of State for Ministry of Human Resource Development, Minister of State for Housing and Urban Development, and also Minister of State for Planning, Independent Charge, and Minister of State Panchayati Raj in his journey. Welcome, Honorable Minister.
थैंक यू अमिताभ कुमार जी। मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
आ रही है सर आपकी आवाज।
अमिताभ जी आवाज आ रही है? ओके, थैंक यू।
आपकी आवाज आ रही है सर क्लियरली।
ठीक है। आज ये मिनिस्ट्री और पोर्ट्स एंड शिपिंग की तरफ से फिक्की और सागरमाला ये सभी ज्वाइंटली आप लोगों ने जो एक समिट रखा है, इस पर आप सभी को शुभकामनाएं। आपकी जानकारी के लिए आपको इस पे पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे हैं हमारे श्री राजकुमार जी शर्मा और इसको कोऑर्डिनेट कर रहे हैं हमारे डायरेक्टर जनरल ऑफ शिपिंग श्री अमिताभ कुमार जी एंड लॉजिस्टिक सेक्टर के सीईओ हमारे कैप्टन रामानुजम जी और डॉक्टर क्लोपेट्रा डोमेबिया हेनरी जिनको भी मैंने सुना, डॉक्टर मालिनी वी शंकर, रिटेड डोलन जी, शेली अग्रवाल जी और शारदा प्रसाद जी और जितने और भी लोग देश के अंदर देश के बाहर जुड़े हैं, सभी को मेरी तरफ से बहुत ही ऑनर है, सम्मान है। और डॉक्टर क्लोपेट्रा डोमेबिया हेनरी को मैंने पूरी उनकी बातें सुनी, बहुत ही वेरी गुड रिमार्क्स फ्रॉम दैट साइड एंड थैंक्स एंड वेलकम डॉक्टर हेनरी फ्रॉम माय साइड। मैं आप सबको, जो आपका विषय है वो बड़ा ही महत्वपूर्ण है और आत्मनिर्भर भारत के परिप्रेक्ष्य में आज शिपिंग मिनिस्ट्री द्वारा और उसमें स्किलिंग फील्ड में आज ज़रूरतें पहले से ज़्यादा मैं समझता हूँ कि बढ़ी हुई है और उसको फोकस करने के लिए चूँकि ऑनरेबल प्राइम मिनिस्टर श्रीमान मोदी जी एक हिंदुस्तान के अंदर भारत की अब तक की परंपराओं में एक बहुत ही अनुभवों से भरे प्रधानमंत्री हैं। शायद ही कोई ऐसा प्रधानमंत्री रहा हो जो 13-14 साल तक के समय को एज ए चीफ मिनिस्टर एक राज्य को हेड किया हो और राज्य को बहुत ऊंचाइयों पर ले गया हो। और वो आज भारत के 7 वर्षों से, लगभग 7 वर्षों से प्रधानमंत्री की जिम्मेवारियां बड़ी ही बखूबी निभा रहे हैं। उन्होंने भारत को एक आत्मनिर्भर भारत में जो कंसेप्ट दिया है, विद इंडिया हम आत्मनिर्भर सक्षम हो और दुनिया के लिए हम सक्षम और आत्मनिर्भर रहे, दुनिया की जरूरतों के लिए। तो ये जो उनका विजन है, उस विजन में पिछले दिनों उनके सारे पुराने अनुभव, आप सबको शायद जानकारी हो कि जरूर होगी, आप इस फील्ड में काम कर रहे हैं, लेकिन मैं उसको रिपीट कर रहा हूं। जब वो चीफ मिनिस्टर ऑफ गुजरात थे तो गुजरात के विकास के लिए उसके समुद्री तटों का जितना बेहतर इस्तेमाल उन्होंने किया, उन्होंने पोर्ट लैंड डेवलपमेंट सेटअप तैयार किया और उसके तहत गुजरात में बहुत विकास की अपार संभावनाएं बढ़ी है। गुजरात जो आगे बढ़ा उसमें उसका भी रोल है। आप सबको स्मरण है मुंबई की उस घटना जो हुई थी, आतंकवादी घटना, उसके बाद देश में तो जब माननीय मोदी जी आए तब उन्होंने कोस्ट गार्ड के बारे में बड़ा प्लानिंग की, लेकिन उसी दौरान उन्होंने गुजरात के कोस्टल एरिया की सिक्योरिटी तक के लिए इतनी बड़ी टाइट प्लानिंग की थी और उसको एग्जीक्यूट किया था। तो उन्होंने जो इस मंत्रालय में जो उन्होंने फोकस पॉइंट किया, और मुझे बेहद खुशी है कि हमारे ऑनरेबल मिनिस्टर मंडाविया साहब इसमें बहुत ही गहराई से जुड़े हुए हैं। आज वो आपसे भी जुड़े, वो आपसे जुड़े हुए सत्रों में वो भी हैं। तो हमारे विभाग के साथ मंडाविया साहब के संग चर्चा के बाद एक एमओयू हुआ जिसमें स्किलिंग पर, जो अभी हम लोगों ने ये स्किलिंग के फील्ड में यहाँ पर अगस्त में किए हस्ताक्षर, उसमें कई ऐसी संभावनाओं के साथ हम सब उसमें फोकस किए हुए हैं। उसके अंदर पोर्ट तथा मैरीटाइम सेक्टर में कैपेसिटी बढ़ाने के लिए तमाम स्किलिंग एंड ट्रेनिंग के कामों को फोकस किया गया है और ये क्वालिफिकेशन पैक्स के साथ पोर्ट सेक्टर में पहचान करने के कामों में और नेशनल ऑक्यूपेशनल स्टैंडर्ड को ध्यान में रख करके ऐसी कई पहलें की गई हैं और इसमें लगभग 16 जॉब रोल चिन्हित किए गए और इसमें ट्रेनिंग इंस्टीट्यूट की हमारे पास जो सेटअप है एनएसटीआई और एनएसडीसी और इन सब सेटअप का पूरा इस्तेमाल करके विभाग उसकी तैयारियों को करके आगे बढ़ रहा है। और ये हम लोगों ने इसमें जो फोकस किया है वो मैरीटाइम सेक्टर में जो स्किल गैप एनालिसिस के बाद ही जो डिमांड जनरेट हो उसके आधार पर हम स्किलिंग के क्षेत्र में आगे बढ़ रहे हैं कि हमारी पहले है। हम लोगों ने ये भी इसमें, चूँकि प्राइवेट सेक्टर का भी अपना एक बड़ा रोल है इस शिपिंग के फील्ड में, तो उनके सीएसआर फंड का भी स्किलिंग सेक्टर में बेहतर उपयोग करके स्किलिंग को करने की हमारी योजना है ताकि आर्थिक बोझ स्किलिंग के फील्ड में कुछ उसमें कंट्रीब्यूशन बढ़ाया जा सके। और मुझे आप सबको जानकारी देते हुए आज के इस अवसर पर कि चेन्नई पोर्ट ट्रस्ट जो आपके मंत्रालय के अधीन है और हमारा एनएसडीसी नेशनल स्किल डेवलपमेंट कॉर्पोरेशन, दोनों ने एक प्रपोजल साझा किया है और उस प्रपोजल में पीएमकेके की स्थापना की हमारी जो प्लान है, ये आज लॉजिस्टिक सेक्टर के लोग पूरी तरह से समिट से जुड़े हैं, मैं समझ सकता हूं, उन्होंने इसमें श्योर किया है और रामानुजम जी इसको बेहतर से देख रहे हैं कि इस जो प्रपोजल साझा हुआ है इसको एक्सिक्यूट करने के लिए और हम लोग उसे एक बेहतर कॉर्पोरेट पीएमकेके की तर्ज पर डेवलप करना चाह रहे हैं। मैं तो आज की समिट में जुड़ के बेहद खुशी के साथ बताना चाहूँगा कि जितना जल्दी इस प्रपोजल को एक्सिक्यूट करने का अवसर आएगा, हम प्रयास करेंगे कि हम और मंडाविया साहब उस जगह खुद उपस्थित होकर के इसको और ज़्यादा बेहतर मैसेज इस फील्ड में देने की कोशिश करेंगे। आज आप सबके बीच में ये जिन जिन विषयों पर आपने चर्चा की है, आज इतने आगे बढ़ने से पहले ये ब्रिस्टिया पोर्ट्स और शिपिंग और वाटरवेज और फिक्की और सागरमाला जो ज्वाइंटली आप लोगों ने इतनी अच्छी, और आज की दुनिया में आज हमारे नौजवानों को जरूरत के हिसाब से जो समिट आई, उसकी मैं शुभकामना बधाई देता हूँ कि आपने अच्छा काम किया, अच्छे कदम उठाए हैं। आपकी ये 2 से लेकर के 1 से मैं समझता हूँ कि आपकी समिट 3-4 दिन की ये समिट बहुत ही प्रभावी रहेगी, क्योंकि मैं अपने उत्तर प्रदेश जैसे राज्य के गांवों से आता हूं और मैं आपको फीडबैक देना चाहता हूं। आज ये जो शिपिंग का एरिया है, खास करके मर्चेंट शिपिंग का एरिया है, वो कैसे लोगों के जीवन स्तर को बेहतर कर रहा है। इस फील्ड में जॉब पाने वाले बंदे सुदूर गांवों से जो आते हैं और जब उनको चांस मिलता है तो मैं उनकी लाइफ, उनके परिवार, सबके स्टैंडर्ड कितने बेहतर होते हैं उसकी आप कल्पना नहीं कर सकते। आज गांव में, चूंकि मैं एक, मेरे जैसा परिचय अमिताभ कुमार जी ने दिया, मैं यूपी के भी कई विभागों को देखा हूँ, पॉलिटिकली भी मैं बहुत गहराई से गांव से जुड़ा हूँ, और निश्चित तौर से रोजगार देने, रोजगार चाहने, रोजगार के लिए देश के अंदर और दुनिया के अंदर जाने की जो कैपेसिटी है, जो क्षमता है, उसमें उत्तर भारत के यूपी बिहार आदि राज्यों की एक अहम भूमिका है, अहम स्थान है उनका, और उनकी मैन पावर का आज पूरे देश में और दुनिया में उनका बेहतर यूटिलाइजेशन होता है। कैसे वहां क्यूरियोसिटी रहती है कि हम शिपिंग के फील्ड में हमको जॉब मिल जाए तो विद इन 5-10 ईयर्स हमारी जिंदगी बदल सकती है। तो ये आज उस दृष्टि से भी ये समिट और हमारा और शिपिंग का वो अपने आप में महत्वपूर्ण कदम उठाता है। और सागरमाला प्रोजेक्ट जो माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के मोदी जी के मार्गदर्शन में गडकरी साहब उसको जो लीड कर रहे हैं, उसने भी अपार संभावनाएं इस सब की बढ़ाई है। और हम लोग तो पता नहीं आप मेरे इस वाक्य को कैसे लेंगे, हम लोग तो चूंकि पंडित जी लोग हमारे यहाँ शुभ मंगल के लिए जब कोई ना कोई पूजा अर्चन करते हैं तो उसमें एक श्री सत्यनारायण जी व्रत की कथा आती है। पता नहीं आपको सबको कभी सुना है कि नहीं, जरूर सुना होगा ऐसा। हमारे, और ये आज से नहीं, हजारों बरस से भारत के जनजीवन में और भारत के अंदर जिन जिन जगहों पर जो क्षेत्रीय भाषाएं हैं, कहीं ना कहीं उन सब में वो कथा आती है, और उस कथा के श्रवण से लोगों का मंगल होता है। उस कथा का सार तत्व है कि सूरत वैश्य जो है कैसे व्यापार करने निकला और क्या क्या हुआ, और उसने फिर कैसे पूजन किया और वो रत्नों बहुत उसका कारोबार बढ़ा। तो कुल मिलाकर के समुद्र और जल मार्ग का महत्व भारतीय जनजीवन में शुरू से, अनादिकाल से, वो एक अलग इतिहास है, चर्चा का विषय कि किसने वास्को डी गामा कौन कौन समुद्र मार्ग से आया, उसने क्या खोज किया और किसने क्या किया, वो अपना एक, उसका अपना एक महत्व है विषय का। लेकिन और हम सब तो भारत की एक विशिष्ट संस्कृति के वाहक हैं। वो विशिष्ट संस्कृति वसुधैव कुटुंबकम की संस्कृति है, जो आज कोविड के पीरियड में और मोदी जैसे सक्षम नेता के नेतृत्व में कैसे भारत के अंदर और दुनिया के अंदर उस क्षमता का प्रदर्शन कर रही है अपने देश के लिए और दुनिया के लिए। लोगों की रक्षा हो, स्वास्थ्य हो, मंगल हो, कैसे हम वैक्सीनेशन के फील्ड में लोगों को मदद कर रहे हैं। तो वसुधैव कुटुंबकम का जो संस्कार है वो कैसे आज दुनिया को भारत दिखा रहा है। वो भारत अपने इस समुद्र क्षेत्र को पृथ्वी का वस्त्र मानता है कि पृथ्वी को समुद्र ने वस्त्र के रूप में अंगीकार किया है। तो समुद्र वसनी देवी, संस्कृत का उस श्लोक में पूरा सुना करके उसमें आपका समय नहीं ज्यादा लूंगा। तो समुद्र तो आज, और जैसा अभी आपने जो फिल्म शो की है, हमारे यहाँ समुद्री क्षेत्र के अध्ययन के लिए विश्वविद्यालय स्टेब्लिश है, उसके अपने 6 कैंपस से, कैसे वहाँ एक हम सब स्टूडेंट लाइफ में लोगों को देखते हैं कि इस बीच में अध्ययन करने वालों का एक अलग आकर्षण है। तो आज इन सब फील्ड में विशेष फोकस करने की जरूरत है, क्योंकि सबसे सहज, सस्ता और परिवहन का मार्ग है जल मार्ग। भारत सरकार ने नदियों के क्षेत्र में भी पहली बार प्राचीन काल के उस विषय को मॉडर्न शेप में, और आप जैसे तमाम जो इतने देश के आप सब अग्रणी लोग हैं, आपके माध्यम से उसे नदियों के क्षेत्र में भारत के अंदर भी उस परिवहन को बढ़ाने की एक बेहतर कोशिश की है। इन सब फील्ड में स्किलिंग की जरूरतों के लिए जो हम सब ने विशेष करके, और मैं थैंक्स करूंगा कि इस एमओयू में शिपिंग के आप सब अधिकारीगण, अमिताभ जी स्वयं उसमें पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे थे और कर रहे हैं, और उनके डिपार्टमेंट के लीडर मंडाविया जी, इन्होंने विशेष पहल की। और मैं आज भी अपने सेक्रेटरी प्रवीण जी से लगातार हूँ कि कैसे वो एक्सक्यूट, थोड़ा जैसे जैसे कोविड की परिस्थितियों से देश उभर रहा है, कैसे वो स्क्रीनिंग के सारे चीजें, उसी में मुझे जानकारियां मिली कि अब काफी आगे हम सब बढ़ चुके हैं। और क्यूपी का पाठ्यक्रम जो हमारे एसडीसी ने प्रशिक्षण के भागीदारों के माध्यम से उसको अच्छी तरह से तैयार कर लिया है। और आप सबके बीच में यहाँ पर हम लोगों ने जो कुछ और ये पहले की है, आपको मैंने पहले बताया 16 रूल्स की हम लोगों ने आइडेंटिफिकेशन करके उसके कोर्सेज तैयार करने की प्रक्रिया अंतिम चरण में है। और इसके साथ साथ ये पूरी हमारी जो योजना है, उस योजना में कुछ रिकमेंडेशन हम लोगों ने जैसे आपके भी शेयर करना मैं जरूरी समझता हूँ कि आज नेशनल वाटरवेज वर्कफोर्स की सुरक्षा बहुत अधिक आवश्यक है। तो इसमें कुछ जो पोर्ट से आने के बाद जो उस माल के परिवहन के लिए तो हैवी कार्गो व्हीकल्स ड्राइवर की भी ट्रेनिंग की जरूरत है, क्योंकि ये अच्छे प्रकार के जो बिल्कुल ट्रेन ड्राइवर्स, तो इसमें भी हम लोगों ने इसको रिलेट किया है इसको ट्रेनिंग करने के लिए। और डिजिटाइजेशन भी काफी बड़ा है, तो रीस्किलिंग डिजिटल फील्ड में भी और उसकी अपस्किलिंग की भी जरूरत है, ये हम सबकी रिकमेंडेशन है। और सागरमाला परियोजना में जो परियोजना समुद्र तट के अनेक प्रकार के विकास के साथ साथ वो औद्योगिकीकरण बढ़ाने में भी सहायक है, तो उस को भी और गहराई से कैसे प्रत्यक्ष और अप्रत्यक्ष दोनों प्रकार के रोजगार उससे प्राप्त हो सकते हैं, उस पॉसिबिलिटीज को भी, और उसमें कहाँ कहाँ स्किल गैप है उसके भी अध्ययन की जरूरत है। ये हमारी कुछ सुझाव आपके सामने हैं। और हम सब लोग जो मोदी जी ने 2014 में आते ही जो उस समय स्मार्ट सिटीज का कंसेप्ट डेवलप किया, और आज कंट्री में स्मार्ट सिटीज के रूप में आगे बढ़ने की होड़ सी लगी हुई है, उस होड़ में अब आ जाओ, तो उस होड़ में आज अपने बीच में ये हम लोगों को इस पर ध्यान देने की जरूरत है कि इंडस्ट्रियल पार्क्स और स्मार्ट सिटीज के साथ भी इसको और ज्यादा क्लोजली जोड़ने की जरूरत है। उसमें भी हम सब काम करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। इसके साथ ही और जितना कुछ हम मैरीटाइम सेक्टर में हम सब जो पर्यावरण की सुरक्षा को भी ध्यान रखते हुए और इन सब चीजों को इतना आगे लेके चलेंगे, शिपिंग इंडस्ट्री और मैरीटाइम क्लस्टर को उतना ही सक्षम बनाने में कारगर होंगे। ये हम सब की पहले हैं। आज आप सबके बीच में मेरा ऐसा मानना है कि मैरीटाइम सेक्टर के लिए आज निवेश करने का बड़ा सही उपयुक्त समय है। और दुनिया में द्वितीय विश्व युद्ध के बाद और इस कोविड की महामारी के शुरू होने की परिस्थिति में एक दुनिया थी, लेकिन कोविड के बाद एक दुनिया में हर फील्ड में नए नए एस्पेक्ट, नई नई जरूरतें, नई नई प्राथमिकताएं, नई नई प्रायोरिटीज तो तय हो रही है। तो उस दुनिया में भारत की जो भूमिका अपने आप, उसकी जो कैपेसिटी है, उसका जो मैन पावर है, उसकी आज की जो हमारी मोदी जी जैसे लीडर के नेतृत्व में लीडरशिप है, एक पारदर्शी, बेहतर और एक अत्यंत गतिशील सरकार है जो आज के साथ साथ हर स्टेप में आज से 10 साल बाद, 20 साल बाद, 30 साल बाद का सोच करके विद इन कंट्री और कंट्री के बाहर दुनिया के लिए जो सोच के चल रही है, उस स्थिति में मैं निश्चित तौर से आह्वान करना चाहूंगा कि मैरीटाइम सेक्टर से सभी, मैं देख रहा हूं सीन पर जितने लोगों को देख पा रहा हूं, सभी शिपिंग कंपनियों से और शिपिंग के कारोबार से जुड़े एक से एक सीनियर पर्सनालिटी से, उन सबको इस समय मैं अपील करूंगा कि इसमें निवेश करने की बहुत ज्यादा जरूरत है, क्योंकि भारत में जो आपने आज का समिट का कंसेप्ट थीम दी है आत्मनिर्भर भारत, उसमें आपकी भूमिका इस देश के अंदर व्यावसायिक फील्ड में काम करने वाले तमाम सेक्टर्स में से सबसे ज्यादा अहम है। और आप कल्पना कर सकते हैं इस नाते समुद्री परिक्षेत्रों पर अपने प्रभुत्व बनाए रखने के लिए आज दुनिया के अनेक देशों में होड़ रहती है। मैं और किसी का नाम नहीं लूंगा, मेरी बात को आप समझ सकते हैं कि उसमें भी सुदूर अंडमान के सुदूर द्वीपों से लेकर के और अपने पड़ोस के देश मालदीव से लेकर छोटे हमारे सहयोगी देश से लेकर सबसे, जिस प्रकार से हमारी सरकार ने कदम उठाए हैं और जिस प्रकार से हमारे एक पड़ोसी देश की कूटनीति का जवाब देते हुए और सुदूर अपने बंदरगाहों में सुदूर कारोबारी रिश्ते अन्य देशों से बनाने की जो अच्छी पहलें हुई हैं, वो सब इस बात को साबित करती है कि मोदी जी की अगुवाई में इस सेक्टर पर भारत सरकार की पूरी नजर है और पूरी प्रायोरिटी है। उसमें आज मेरा विश्वास है कि सही मार्गदर्शन और सही ट्रेनिंग और उस ट्रेनिंग के बेहतर परफॉर्मेंस हम क्षेत्र में सक्षम और समर्थ हो सकते हैं। और आज की आपकी ये समिट और आपकी समिट 4 तक चलने वाली ये समिट, इसका जो किया जाएगा वो निश्चित तौर से हम अपनी तरफ से आपको एश्योर करना चाहेंगे, इससे जुड़े सभी लोगों को, कि मेरी मिनिस्ट्री जो भी इनपुट आप सबके इस समिट से निकलेगा, मैं पूरी खुद भी चिंता करूंगा और हमारा पूरी टीम हमारी चिंता करेगी कि उस कंक्लूजन के आधार पर हम स्किलिंग के फील्ड में अपने निर्धारित जागरूक से और जागरूक बढ़ाने हो, संस्थाओं को और इन्वॉल्व करना हो। जैसे चेन्नई में हम लोगों ने एमयू किया है आपके शिपिंग के संग, हम लोग चर्चा करेंगे 2-3 और फील्ड में अगर कहीं इस पर जरूरत होगी कि आपस में परस्पर एक प्रपोजल साझा करके आगे बढ़ने की, ताकि इस कंट्री के सारे इलाके के नौजवानों को इसमें स्किलिंग के अवसर मिले और समुद्र क्षेत्र में व्यावसायिक गतिविधियों से लेकर के व्यावसायिक कारोबार करने वालों को अवसर उपलब्ध कराने से, उनको बेहतर मैन पावर, बेहतर स्किल्ड में वर्कफोर्स उपलब्ध कराने से लेकर के और देश और देश के बाहर भी एक बेहतर स्किल और शिपिंग फील्ड की, मैरीटाइम फील्ड की एक्सपर्ट स्किल पर्सन, स्किल वर्कफोर्स उपलब्ध हो सके और उनको गुड क्वालिटी की अपॉर्चुनिटी, उनको बेहतर जीवन शैली की अपॉर्चुनिटी देश के अंदर देश के बाहर मिल सके और उनकी हेल्थ केयर की भी सारी चिंताएं उसके संग, क्योंकि समुद्र के क्षेत्र में लंबी अवधि तक काम करने वालों के स्वास्थ्य से संबंधित विषयों को भी कोरिलेट करके चलने से इस काम में और बेहतरी आएगी। इन सबों की बातों के आग्रह के साथ और आपके बेहतर इनपुट की भविष्य में प्रतीक्षा के साथ मेरा डिपार्टमेंट आपकी इस टीम के संग जुड़ के बेहतर काम करने के लिए तैयार है। और मैं आपकी ये आयोजन और ये जो अभियान है पूरी तरह से सक्षम हो, सफल हो और आत्मनिर्भर भारत की मुहिम में आप सबसे, हम सब मिलके सबसे बड़ा रोल अदा कर सकें, इस विश्वास के साथ आप सभी को मैं अपनी शुभकामनाएं देता हूं और आप सबको आदर देता हूं। कुछ देर आपको सुनूंगा, उसके बाद एक और चीज से जुड़ने वाला हूं, इस नाते में थोड़ी देर के बाद आपसे इजाजत चाहूंगा। अमिताभ जी, आपके माध्यम से सभी को नमस्कार।
धन्यवाद मंत्री जी. Thank you very much. The Honorable Minister stressed on the need of cooperation between the Ministry of Port Shipping and Waterways and Ministry of Skill Development to identify the gaps in the skill in the logistic value chain. He has already identified and entered into MOU between the two ministries for skill development in ports and waterways. He also emphasized that they have identified the need for skill development of drivers who ultimately carry the cargo from the hinterland. He emphasized that there is a need for skill development of the coastal community for port-led industrialization, and mentioned that there is a huge potential of direct and indirect jobs in the country for which skill development is essential. I could speak a lot on the initiatives that the Honorable Minister narrated in his speech, but because of the shortage of time, I would just give you a brief of what was discussed. We have a galaxy of speakers, but I would like to change the program a little bit because I have received a request from Mr. Madhu Nair, chairman of Cochin Shipyard, because he has to convene another session at 2 o'clock and he will have to leave a little early. So, Mr. Madhu Nair, if you can speak first, and then we can resume our sequence.
Thank you very much, Amitabh. Just a brief introduction to Mr. Nair. Mr. Nair is currently the chairman and managing director of Cochin Shipyard Limited, which is one of the biggest ship manufacturers in the country. He is BTech in Naval Architecture and Shipbuilding from Cochin University and Masters in Engineering and Naval Architecture, Ocean Engineering from Osaka University. They have set up different centers in the country, and apart from Kochi, they have now 6 more centers around the country. And Mr. Nair is very dynamic officer, and he has he is member of the professional bodies such as Royal Institute of Naval Architects, UK, Institute of Naval Architects, India, and member board of studies of Cochin University. Mr. Nair will be speaking on the deep sea fishing, the potential and the ship design, etc. Over to you, Mr. Nair.
Thanks a lot, Sri Sharda Prasad and Sri Amitabh Kumar. First of all, thanks for this slight readjustment. My topic today, I'm talking on a slightly different topic, which is skilling in the segment of fishing vessels and fishing sector in India. Shaili, can I have the presentation, please? What is very important is, like, we are talking about a segment which is deeply connected with the poorest of the poor people in India, and these are the fishermen folk. We are talking about sustainable deep sea fishing, and straight away we jump into what is the status of the industry in India today. The Indian fishing industry, I can bracket it into 4 large buckets: a low quality of catch, an underdeveloped boat industry, weak financing issues, and poor return on investments. When we talk on this subject, we are talking about the common, the normal fishermen. We are not talking about the big time players in the industry. We are talking about the normal fishermen folk who go out, catch fish, come back, talk to middlemen, reach them out to the exporters, and then there's a market out there. But let's briefly try to understand each of these buckets. On the skill levels and the quality of the catch, very limited exposure to the value chain and technology. It's absolutely traditional and conventional, no formal training, poor handling of fish resulting in poor quality, and thereby which naturally would lead to extremely low returns, and exploited by the middlemen because they are not really educated. So we need to, these are four major factors in the which is resulting in the low skill level and the low quality of catch. Now come to the boats in which they actually go for this fishing. These are again non-standard designs, not professionally engineered, highly unsafe. And India, as we know, like 7,500 kilometers of our coastline, the East Coast and the West Coast act differently. The East Coast is susceptible to the cyclones and the return of the monsoon. And we do have quite a bit of accidents every year. Very poor build quality, frequent damages and loss of life, very poor storage systems, practically no storage system, just dump a block of ice and then the fish is put into this ice, you come back and almost by the time you return back, the fish is not in the best condition. Very low mechanization and use of conventional fishing gear. Come to the third bucket, financing ecosystem. Banks view these people as high-risk community because they're not organized and very limited collateral options because they don't save for tomorrow. They don't have that kind of money. It's a hand-to-mouth existence. And the return on investment, if they find some money and try to put in a vessel, very meager return on investment because of unproven designs, not certified. Insurance is not there. So if they lose the vessel or some damages happen to the vessel, they're in bad shape. Next slide. So essentially, if the landed fish quality remains low, you'll see what happens on the right side. The economic returns from the marine resources in India will be low. And fishermen, as somebody said, they will be born poor, they will live poor, they'll die poor. This is, after so many years of independence, this is actually something which is plaguing us. As a professional, as somebody, as a company which has tried to build some of the best vessels in the country, why did we get into it? Can we have the next slide? Again, we know there's lack of good auction places. You are at the mercy of middlemen. And the last point, we have two separate systems here. The one is what we are talking from the catch to the shore. That's one part, which is where your vessels come in. The second part is from the shore to the kitchen, which is where agents, marketing, and your export systems come in. Can I have the next slide? See, it's straight away coming to the conclusion that deep sea fishing needs to be propagated in this country because you need to go with good vessels and actually standardized vessels. Look at all those four buckets: insurance, finance, supply chain, and the ecosystem needs to be touched upon. There's a big market in India because there are at least 35,000 vessels of various types, traditional, conventional vessels, which needs to be touched upon by technology. People needs to be skilled up. But straight away, we feel there is more than 10,000 vessels by 2030 that needs to be on again, three buckets. It needs to be on a proven design and a proven concept, and it must generate reasonably high quality vessels. We got into this as a large shipyard building India's prestigious aircraft carrier and a lot of other vessels for the global market. We got into this because this was the insight which we got from the government. Next slide. This is a case study which we have done. 16 of these vessels we have built and delivered to the state of Tamil Nadu. And these are the results. This was done under the Blue Revolution scheme of the Honorable Prime Minister of India. This was done to sort out some issues between India and Sri Lanka, because between India and Sri Lanka, people were trawling, and trawling is not a responsible means of fishing. India has got 150 kilometers of our exclusive economic zone. And if you go west, there's plenty of catch, but people didn't know how to do it, and there were not enough good boats. So what we did is 16 vessels as a pilot project, and straight away that last sentence can give you the hint. Fish was being sold at 70 to 90 rupees a kg, which is about $1 to $1.5 a kg. And straight away, the fish being caught by our vessels are being sold at double that price. How did we evolve this solution? It was not about Cochin Shipyard alone. We got together. Central Institute of Fisheries Technology, the #1 institution in India under the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. Indian Register of Shipping, such vessels need not be classed, but we got the Classification Society. We got IIT Kharagpur online for model testing and the engineering part. Institutions like the SIFNet and the MPDA, and we came in the center. We created these vessels. And these vessels are today changing the lives of at least a set of fishermen. Next slide. We are lucky that we are having a visionary Prime Minister. Under this Prime Minister's guidance, today something called the PMMSY. This is the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana, which is all about changing the lives of fishermen folk through a sustained and focused approach. 20,500 crores is the investment, which is about $3 billion US. The fish production needs to increase. The targets are 13.75. Can we have that slide? To about a 22 million metric ton. And what we are trying to do is double the export earnings from about 50,000 crore rupees today to about a lakh crore. A lakh crore is about 15 billion US. And this will touch generation of about 15 lakh gainful employment. But when we have to do this, what is the most important part is standard fishing vessels and training. Can we have the next slide? Key issues: financing and subsidy realization, handling, training and infrastructure, registration and assistance on certification, access to exporters, cutting the middleman, and a minimal viable product. A lot of banks, financial institutions, exporters, our national institutions are involved here. And what we are trying to do here is, next slide. Under the PMMSY, we are trying to create the schemes which are nationwide, uniform, standardized vessels, so that people understand how to operate these vessels, so that you can drive standard training modules, less misuse of subsidies. The benefits to the stakeholders are you're having standard vessels, the exporters or the final market understands the quality of fish that will come in. Europe and Japan are large consumers for Indian fish. So they actually can work along with our industry to develop this segment. Consistency in quality across various fish harbors in India and uniform pricing across harbors. Next slide. And for financing, as we said, since the banks were not willing to step in, today under the PMMSY, since there are standardized models and trained fishermen, the banks have now started to come in. Cochin Shipyard has actually teamed up with the Union Bank of India, one of the largest banks in India. State Bank of India and Axis Banks are also talking. Today, funding is available to the fisherman without collateral. He doesn't have to sell his home or he doesn't have to pledge his home. With the boat as collateral, funding is actually available. And this is all under the ambit of the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana. Next slide. Just to capture, we say when we talk about India, for my foreign friends out here, we talk about in this country we talk about India and Bharat, and this is a little bit of a management jargon which we are using today. But when we say Bharat is the quintessential India. This is about the normal Indian. This is about the normal fisherman folk, the normal agriculture person in India. We are talking about 5 key points on a standardized board, which is an optimized design, variants, choice of variants. So if you can put in a little bit extra money, you get extra features like in a commercial vehicle. After sales and life cycle support, dovetail training and skill development, and gap funding options. With these five scenarios, we are here as a country, as a shipyard. We are trying to realize the vision of the Honorable Prime Minister and the government today to change the livelihood, change the lives of some common Indian folks who have not had it very good over the last many years after independence. That's what I wanted to convey. Time is at a premium in this session, but it's about standardization and skilling, getting together to change lives of common people. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Mr. Nair, for your excellent presentation. You hit the nail by saying that the three issues, the standardization of designs, the financing, and the skilling, these are three core areas where we need to really help our fishermen. Thank you very much for that presentation. Our next speaker is an eminent administrator, Dr. Malini Shankar. She was DG Shipping for quite a long time, and she is basically an IS officer of 1984 batch of Maharashtra cadre, and she is currently the Vice Chancellor of Indian Maritime University. She has also been nominated by IMO as an honorary member of the Board of Directors of the World Maritime University, and she has her doctoral degree in institutional finance from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, and also a management degree from Asian Institute of Management, Manila. And she was selected in February 2020 as one of the 7 global recipients of AAA award by the Asian Institute of Management, Manila. And she is the first Indian woman to have received this award. She is member of the government appointed board of board of directors of ILFS Group, and she is also chairperson of National Shipping Board. She is a unique combination of an administrator, a manager, as well as an academician. So, over to you, Dr. Malini.
Ma'am, you are muted.
You are muted.
Yeah. Thank you for the kind introduction, Dr. Sharada Prasad. At the outset, I would like to thank the Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways for giving an opportunity to share my views in this august audience. Mr. Amitabh Kumar, Mr. Sharada Prasad, esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I have been asked to talk today on the gaps in Indian maritime education, training and research and the role of the Indian Maritime University. May I request Shaili to share the presentation, please? Yeah. Yeah. Next slide. Thank you. So I will start with the Maritime Vision 2030, which is the base document for going forward. So what I'm just going to highlight some of the points that have been included in the Maritime Vision insofar as maritime education and training are concerned. First among them is the formation of a maritime knowledge cluster for collaborative research network, both domestic and international. And this will it's envisaged to look at policy, shipbuilding, law, and insurance, things that have been pointed out by the speakers who preceded me. Also, policy research on strategic goals envisaged by IMO, because we find that whenever India is represented at the International Maritime Organization, we seem to be more reactive. I think it's time to be more proactive, and that is the key of the inclusion of this policy research on strategic goals. The other points that have been highlighted include research, innovation, and technology commercialization, the formation of a living lab facility, marine startup incubation. This will be done in collaboration with industry leaders and the VCs. Insofar as the university itself is concerned, the highlights include strengthening of curriculum, looking at dual degrees, looking at co-branded courses in new emerging topics and technologies. Technology has changed over a period of time, so we have to look at these things. Academic partnerships with foreign universities to leverage the strengths of the institutions. These include inter alia, student exchange, curriculum building, as well as brand credibility. And the last one, which is very specific, is we have campus in 6 cities in India. So these six campus will be converted into center of excellence with specialized domains. For example, the Vishakhapatnam campus is highly specialized in shipbuilding, naval architecture, and ocean technology and development, which have been repeatedly mentioned uh, by the World Maritime University and by the Skill Development Minister. So next slide, please. So what are the industry trends? Very briefly, I thought I would just mention some of the trends that we observe based on reports that have coming out in the sector. Logistics sector is growing, but this is maritime logistics, but certain other sectors are pretty nascent at the moment, which includes maritime insurance, arbitration, informatics, which includes artificial intelligence and blockchain. There's a lot of talk, but there is not much growth on the ground. As far as offshore is concerned, the BIMCO management, the manpower assessment says there will be officer shortage on board. While it says that the ratings, there may not be a dearth of ratings, but as far as officers are concerned, there's likely to be a shortage. This is perhaps due to the fact that the active life of an officer seafarer is actually reducing over the last decades. It used to be 20 to 30 years, but right now it is just 10 to 15 years. There are technology disruptions, and therefore it's predicted that the nature of jobs will be centered on energy efficiencies. AI will drive the growth, but technology disruptions have to be taken into consideration when we determine the training and skill content. As far as harbor development is concerned, the industry trends are cruise industry, heritage, and tourism will drive this sector. And for port development, the Maritime Vision 2030 has a lot of inputs, including PPP enterprises, which are poised for an increase, and inland waterways development, which the Honorable Prime Minister himself mentioned that India is focusing on. The next slide, please. Just a snapshot on maritime education and training. What are the global trends? The survey done by the MARTID in 2019, and this is reflected in a World Maritime University report. If you look at the training methods which are being used by the global maritime training institutions, and you look at face-to-face classroom, video e-learning, internet e-learning, simulation, tabletop exercise, job shadowing, and coaching, it is basically face-to-face classrooms and a little bit of simulation, a lot on simulation. These are the two major factors which are very highly used in training methods. But if you look at the pandemic, and this is a 2019 report, if we do this survey today, it will probably change, and there will be more emphasis on hybrid methods, internet e-learning, video e-learning, and also shadowing. Job shadowing is driven by global ship onshore slots. So this will become important, and its significance lies in the fact that this job shadowing will actually determine what are the skill sets to be imparted to the cadets and the students in the future. So in line with these trends, IMU is implementing or taken up certain initiatives in creating learning opportunities. And I will just give a snapshot of some of those in the next slide, which basically focus on improved digitalization and mock sessions. So what are the gaps that we've identified, and therefore the gaps that we are going to be have already started addressing, or we are going to be addressing in the coming months? So low engagements in core research. The IMU is a specialized central university set up by the government of India, and the research level is not is below par. So that is one area which we have identified. Most of the research in maritime domain is being conducted by IITs, NIOT, NIO, NCSCM, and the National Institutes of Technology. The other gaps that we've identified are the need for innovation funding and startup curriculum, internship training slots that need to be increased across the board, both technology as well as management. It's not just for on-board internship training, but also training for all the other courses that we offer. The Maritime University offers courses in technology, which is marine engineering, nautical science, as well as management related to the maritime sector, which includes logistics, transport, and supply chain. One of the key things that we find is, especially in the field of nautical science, less so in marine engineering, but definitely that is also an area of concern, is that how do we facilitate the evolution and the metamorphosis of a on board, a trained seafarer into coming into the teaching profession, the skilling profession, because there are certain requirements, certain characteristics which are needed for a person to get into the academic profession. And we are trying to see how that path is really undefined. We are in the process of trying to see how we can facilitate that path so that we get all these experienced professionals, experts who are outside of the academic field to get into the academic field and share their knowledge so that our graduates turn out to be more competent. So that is related to the, when we say shortage of faculty with expertise, that's related to that, especially in the field of nautical science. So a few initiatives that we have taken, we are in the process of taking. Some of them are in a little advanced stage, some of them have already been done. Number one is curriculum improvements, including improvements in pedagogy. So as far as curriculum improvement is concerned, introduction of electives, microcredit courses, tabletop exercises. For example, we do not have specialization in casualty investigation, minor options, a person who is a cadet who is trained to be an engineer or a captain has to also know a little bit about maritime finance, especially insurance, because out at the sea, insurance becomes very, very important. We've one of the biggest, most significant initiatives we've taken is, which has been highlighted even in the national education policy of the recently published by the Indian government, is engagement with industry. Marine engineering, nautical science, they are very, applied sciences, and we need to engage with the industry to know what are the research projects that we can take up, what are the internships that can give experience to our cadets. So the two types, one is we have actually engaged and formed an MOU with the CII Institute of Logistics in Chennai, for example. We already have a MOU with the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers in London, but we are more actively engaging in the one which is locally in South India. For faculty development, because it's not enough that we train the students, but we also have to ensure that the people who teach the students, the faculty, have updated domain knowledge, and they enhance on a very periodic basis, they enhance their knowledge. We have engaged with our own professional bodies, which is the Institute of Marine Engineers of India and the Company of Master Mariners of India. These are people, most of them are graduates, they are alumni of the IMU or its erstwhile institutes. The CMMI, for example, has launched, they were first off the ground, they have launched a mentoring program, which is one-on-one mentoring program by the CMMI to our students. About 30 of them will be mentored, handheld, till not only till they get their job, but beyond the job, till they find their footing in the industry. We've started with 30. We hope to expand. Other institutions are coming forward. Other professional bodies are coming forward to do similar exercise. The Institute of Marine Engineers has agreed to fund a chair in the IMU, and this chair, unlike what we foresee, this chair, what we envisage this chair to be, is not a professor who will be engaging in teaching. He or she can teach, may not teach, but a chair which will actually connect the university, the academia, with the industry, identify projects of research in the industry and actually give it to the IMU. And this is going to be mutually beneficial for both the industry as well as the university. And once this is the pilot project, this is a pioneering one. And once we get our experience, we plan to get more chairs this way, because we really need to focus on the research and independent thinking. We have certain MOUs, and we are in the process of activating them and identifying specific areas. Erasmus is just one of them. We are talking to several of them to see, seafarers' well-being, for example, is an area which is not technical, which is not managerial, but actually the need of the hour, because the pandemic has actually accentuated the need for looking at seafarers' well-being and having a structured program by which we can actually we can enable them to deal with such adverse situations. NIOT, IIT Madras, Siemens, talking to them for synergies in workshops, labs, training and research, whether it's faculty training, whether it's workshops. Siemens we are looking at them to set up up-to-date, state-of-the-art labs. And besides that, of course, we look at improving the infrastructure, whether it is software infrastructure or modern workshops, enhancing training equipment, simulators, gas turbine, ship equipment, because without having state-of-the-art equipment, the students, the graduates are not going to be very, very adept at dealing with the real life situations. One last point on the previous slide, which is not there, but I think it is very, very important, is soft skills. The imparting of soft skills, which is communication skills. Because one of the feedback we keep getting from the industry is that there are two skills which are, which the Indians have to work on. One is the attitude and the other is communication skill. We've already started working on that. Both are slow processes. The communication skill will probably get faster, but attitudes is a long-term engagement with the students, faculty, and with the stakeholders. So these are some of the initiatives, and I would invite the participants, the listeners, especially the foreign delegates, as well as the Indian stakeholders. There are opportunities for partnership with the IMU, scope for cooperation with the institutions at various levels, not limited to technology and nautical science, but beyond that to a whole gamut of subjects that cover maritime, including not just logistics, but finance, law, insurance, etc. Training and development programs, we're engaging with the Inland Waterways, Waterways Authority of India, the Maharashtra Maritime Board. There is a proposal, we do not have standardized procedures for training pilots, riverine pilots as well as sea pilots. So there is a demand for setting up a state-of-the-art pilot training institution. So that is something which falls within the skill area. So these are all not the degreed ones, but the skilled ones. And of course, industry networking with so that we can work on both curriculum, which is more beneficial to industry, meets the demand of the industry, as well as the skill sets which can be renewed, refreshed, as well as new skills which can be imparted. So this is what I had to share with it. Thank you for the time. And I look forward to having more interactions with the like-minded stakeholders of the industry, both domestic as well as international. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malini Shankar, for a beautiful presentation. I'm sure if the initiative which have been started by you, they are carried forward, they will transform the maritime education and training in the country. So thank you very much. We have luckily President World Maritime University also here. Is there any effort to collaborate with them so that we can bring the best to the MU from WMU?
Sir, we are very short of time. We will skip these interactions for future. We have 3 more speakers for today, and then question and answer session. Dr. Shankar has very elaborately listed out the vision that Maritime India Vision has for maritime education, training, and skill development. As she mentioned in her presentation, a lot of knowledge creation is happening at different institutions, IITs, NIOS, NIOT, maritime institutes, IMU. But there is still a lack of cohesion and collaboration. The industry's demand is something else. Research is happening in a field which is not necessarily useful for the industry. Norway has mastered the art of collaborating and bringing all of them together under this triple helix approach that they use for creating clusters. We have with us today Mr. Per Erik Dellen, who is educated in the field of aviation, economics, and administration, and is now heading Ellison Knowledge Park, which works in the field of innovation, entrepreneurship, and business development. As part of his work at AKP, he is CEO of the Cluster Administration, Blue Maritime Cluster, Global Center of Expertise. Welcome, Mr. Dillon, and we look forward to hear from you. And you must have understood why we were so keen to have you on board to learn from your experience and see what we can do for the cluster that we plan to set up here in India.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I wonder, will you put up the presentation or do I put on my own?
Shall you put up the presentation, please?
Yeah. Okay, I will give you. I just have a few minutes, so I'll give you a brief talk about what we are doing in the Blue Maritime Cluster and how we are thinking. Next slide, please. We are a part of the Norwegian Maritime Cluster, the big one, and overside of it is located on the west coast of Norway. And as you can see, it's blue all over the place. So we are living with and off the sea. That's our tradition. And this cluster's main role has been to develop and operate advanced vessels, especially for fish industry and oil, gas, and now into new segments. I have to say, when we had this oil gas boom, we built up the education for seafarers. And at Campus Ålesund, we have more than 40 simulators. So we are training all types of seafarers on simulator in a manner like aviation has done for years. So that has been really a step forward. And we're also using digital twins to train on special operations. So when we are doing this difficult maneuvers in the oil gas, we will train on the concept a long time before we start the vessels. So that's the part. We are also culture-wise, you can see we have a long tradition of old from the Vikings and all the way to today. Somebody should mute the microphone because I start hearing. Yeah. We have a tradition of cooperate and when we can and compete when we must. And you asked about the cluster thinking. I think that's very good when you are building up a cluster, so you are actually try to help it. Next slide, please. We are 220 companies, 60 billion Norwegian kroner revenues yearly. And we are a complete cluster, and that's very important. So we design, we build, we equip, and we operate, and we have the finance and research institute and all this together. So that's how we have built up the cluster. Now we are in a change due to different. We will now start training people on new technologies, new type of operations, because we see a future and a new economy. The world needs more protein, it needs more energy, minerals, and also transportation. But we have to do it in another way. So what we are trying to do now is to build up a new next generation of vessels. And of course, that will change the needs of training. Next slide. We are building up a mirror ocean to train and get experience on all types of operations. Next slide shows the lab. It goes all the way from the Atlantic Ocean and into the deep fjords. So we can do all the we have the test area of vessels, and we working on the seabed, noise, all these things. Next, of course, digitalization is really transforming the industry. We use all these facilities. We have the autonomy, we have the remote control, and of course we are doing fleet operation from onshore. And of course you see the fjord in the map. This is one of the new auto crossing ferries with the docking and everything, and also this has the battery, of course, installed. Next, please. Cybersecurity was something that we really work with to the autonomous vessels, all these things, and same it autonomous vessels. So cybersecurity is also an area. And then we have the green side of it. We are looking for zero emissions. We are working with all type of electric, biofuel, LNG, hydrogen, ammonia, and we try really to get out all these things, and also looking at the carbon capture, shore power, because when we started with LNG, we were too slow on building up the logistic on onshore on the LNG, and this time with the hydrogen and ammonia, we will be up front on that too. Next, please. Yes, this is again, we are working a lot with ferries because they are close, so it's easy to test out new things, and you will see that Norway is building a lot of this very advanced ferries at the moment. And our thinking is that the experience in this we will bring out to the other segments, fishery. We are looking at now the next generation of vessel with plants on board, not only taking the pellet but also the bycatch and take the ingredient of the bycatch and get the quality of that. Next, please. Yeah, logistics. This the plug-in ferry with 2,000 passengers, and of course using a really new battery package. So this was the ship of the year in 2019. So we are on the way on a cruise vessel, but that will take some time because we probably need hydrogen and ammonia to do that. And of course, we have the next slide. This is transit tourist. This one, the next one, please. This one is a new electric testing vessel for ocean area, and actually in the bad weather here today, it's testing number 2 of them. It's a kind of special, but again, it brings up new possibilities, experience, and we have to train all our engineers, technical people, and the seafarers to do this new generation. And of course, we take next slide. We also, next please. Yeah, we are also working with how to keep the nature, and we are now building up this new maps, and we also put in the equipment to see what's going on when we are actually trawling, doing all these things in the ocean, to see how the seabed and things are. And next slide. Yes, this is again the Møre Ocean Lab. As you can see, we are a consortium of doing this, and that's the way of building the hub. And you can see we are doing sea tractor, autonomous vessels, deep sea trawling, sensors, wave power, and marine farming and offshore agriculture. At the moment, we are building a lot of very big advanced offshore agriculture vessels, and also wind vessels, the bigger advanced service vessels. So all in all, we are looking for the future and will be in the markets. And of course, we will also retrofit oil gas vessels into the green technology to be even cleaner on that. So we have a cluster and education. As long as we try to be in the front, it's very important for us. And you see the triple helix working well, so actually go hand in hand and doing all this. Even though we are a small country compared to you, we probably have knowledge, maybe products could be interesting for India as well. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dallin. It was really an impressive presentation. We will definitely have some questions for you after all the speakers have contributed. A very similar concept to knowledge cluster. I think we didn't have Mr. Thomas Ting when we started, but he has joined. He would be speaking on living labs. Mr. Thomas is a graduate in computer engineering from NTU and holds MBA from NUS. He began his career with the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore as a systems analyst and has since taken up various roles within and outside MPA. Welcome, Mr. Thomas Ting. Shally, can we have his presentation?
Good afternoon, the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for inviting me to this prestigious summit. Interesting to note the presentation from our Norwegian friends, Per. The Ocean Labs, in a way, is a form of living lab in our own interpretation. Feel free to let me know if my sound projection is not so good during the presentation. You can stop me halfway. Otherwise, I will get into the presentation proper. It's a very short one, 7 slides. This first slide is basically broad statistics of the maritime Singapore. The maritime industry is a very important industry to Singapore. It forms 7% of our GDP and employs more than 170,000 people. And basically, as you know, trade is the lifeline of Singapore. And our trade actually accounts for more than 3 times our gross domestic products. And maritime industry, of course, is the foundation to maritime trade. Next slide, please. I think also suffice to say that the Port of Singapore, despite the COVID situation, has fared pretty well last year. We maintained the container handling of about 37 million 20-foot equivalents of container handling last year. And we also facilitated more than 100,000 crew change so far, and our port remains open. Okay, so today's topic is a very specific area of innovation, which is about living lab. So what is a living lab? It's basically about creating a live environment for open innovation, for organizations, for countries to work with external parties. This is our definition. Essentially, you put it in a very simple form. Organizations are creating a playground for their employees to interface with external innovators like research institutions, like startups, tech developers. It can be your suppliers, it can be your customers, it can be your partners. So we know that a lot of R&D projects that we invest in never materialize into the commercialization stage. And simply because a lot of them ends at the laboratory and has no opportunities to test some of these technologies with their customers in a live environment. And therefore, creating a living lab is actually to create a playground with live situation, a scale-up environment, and the actual environment for products and solutions to demonstrate and be refined over a period of time and eventually bring that to commercialization. So the key concepts here is about creating a live environment, and it's about open innovation. And I will just talk a little bit about open innovation. There are many different open innovation models. Companies basically want to source external knowledge and expertise to augment their own organization's knowledge and talent. All companies want to do living lab because they want to actually exploit good ideas, good knowledge, good IPR that is currently unutilized. So I want to exploit and harness the value of my data and my idea outwards by working with partners and collaborators or customers. Or it can be a combination of both. In this case, we call it the coupled open innovation. And why are companies doing open innovation? I will put it very simply. One is you want to create new products and solutions. You want to generate new growth areas for your organizations. Two is because you want to strengthen your network and relationships with your customers, suppliers, and partners through co-innovations. And lastly, and very importantly, a lot of organizations do that because they want to reduce their R&D and innovation costs. By doing some of these things with your partners, actually you don't have to rely on heavy R&D investment through in-house R&D capabilities. Next slide, please. And in Singapore, we are already planning our next generation port, which will span over 20 years of development through reclamation of green fuel. And this new port at the western end of Singapore in future will have a handling capacity of up to 65 million 20-foot equivalents by year 2040. And being a green field, a lot of us actually spend a lot of time thinking about what is the new future concept operation is going to be like for the port, for the ship, and for the fuel of the ship, and for the port services. So these are all important questions because ultimately it's about not only the efficiencies of your operations, but it's also about attracting the next generation talent into your organizations. If we don't transform the way we work today, you have been hearing a lot from these younger generations that some of these jobs in the maritime sectors are actually not attractive. Whether you are doing a container lashing, unlashing job, you are doing a coning, deconing job, you're doing a prime mover drivers, you are operating a container crane, you're working on the ship, doing some very dangerous and manual work, inspections and all that. Some of these jobs are actually not very attractive to the next generations of talents in this, especially in this highly digitalized world. So thinking about the future concept operations, eventually you have to provide an environment for your staff, your employees, to actually interface with the external innovators. These are your startups, technology developers, and this can be your research institutions. And the future, we know all of us know that the future of ships and the future of port is going to be very different from today, based on all the available technology that it is today. Next slide, please. And we position the Port of Singapore as a living lab. MPA for us, I will just highlight a few projects that is within our living lab. One is the next generation vessel traffic management systems. Singapore Port Waters is extremely busy with about 1,000 vessels in our port waters. Of course, we have a lot of VTS crew to look at some of these sea traffics using their own expertise. But how about using technology, augmented reality, AI, to help them forecast vessel collision and avoid some of these hot spots in the port waters from being built up. Just now, one of them also talked about pilotage. We are also looking at new concept operations in terms of remote pilotage. The pilotage operation today is still fairly dangerous, involving the pilots to going up to the ships through the ladders, and sometimes accidents are involved. How about looking into the futures where the pilots are actually at the shore side through augmented reality and video streaming, able to actually guide the captains for certain parts of the journey into the port. And of course, it's also about creating environments for smart or autonomous ships and maritime drones to be able to operate in the port waters. So these are the roles of the port authorities so far. As far as our container cargo operator is concerned, PSA, the things that they are experimenting, the living lab, which we also help them to set up, things like automated guided vehicles, potentially to replace the drivers of the prime mover. And I just want to highlight that here it's not a problem where we're taking away jobs, but rather we face the situation where actually not many people want to be prime mover drivers. We're talking about many thousands of them working over 3 or 4 shifts. And these are the areas where if we face manpower shortage, we have to find automation solutions to overcome some of these constraints. And likewise for key cranes, yacht cranes, not many people wants to operate some of these cranes. So today we have some of these cranes, instead of the operator operating over the crane, we have them operating in the remote centers, air-conditioned room, through a joystick. They control comfortably the operations of the containers. So these are the job redesign and reinvention that actually will help us to attract and retain talent. Of course, technology is one component. As you plan for new concept operations, you need to plan together the kind of training and upskilling and reskilling of the workforce so that they are able to handle the new technology and new concept operations, which is very key to the setup of the living lab. Next slide, please. And based on my experience setting up and managing the living lab, I will just highlight some of the key consideration. If you as India as a country, a maritime nation, or whether as a organization, ship owner or managers, if you're thinking about setting up a living lab, these are some of the key considerations. Whether you are willing to set up an infrastructure, a live environment that allows for experimentation, and you have to set up the kind of regulatory boundaries between the life, because if anything fails, you also don't want it to negatively affect your mission critical operations. So where do you set the boundaries and yet allows technology developers to co-innovate with you? The data infrastructure is equally important. Startups, they survive on data. Without data, they cannot do anything with you. Then where do you set the boundaries of the data such that they can have access to the data with a proper data governance? And some of the experimentation that we have in terms of connectivity, we are facing issues, quite a fair bit of issues in terms of connectivity, because today in the port waters, you only have 3G and 4Gs. But a lot of all these video streaming, actually 3G and 4G might not be enough. So how to overcome some of these communication challenges in your living lab infrastructure? Second consideration is in terms of organization, objectives, structure, and culture. Do we have a clear objectives of why you want to do a living lab, why you want to do open innovation? And is your team properly organized and structured to collaborate with third parties like startups? Startups, they have a different mindset, they work on a different time frame. Can you work with the kind of speed with them, the researchers, and also the collaboration between the operations and the technology teams? The operations people are very busy people. So they always tell us they don't have time to do all these innovation and all those stuff. But technology people want to push some of these new concept operations to the operations people. So are you structured properly with the right incentives to actually allow your operation and technology people to work together and to work with the third-party innovators like startups? And the third piece I will talk about is sustainability. The key consideration: have you done your cost benefit analysis when you set up the living lab? And also whether you have the innovation platform to collect new ideas, to generate good problem statements, industry level problem statements, and be able to broadcast it to the technology community, thereby generating a pipeline of projects that will sustain the living lab. And the last area I will talk about, a very important area, is where a lot of projects get into issues is because of all this signing of agreement, the IPR, intellectual property discussion. You have to have that sorted out. What kind of collaboration agreement are you going to sign with your partners or customers when you co-innovate? Who is going to own IP? Who is going to have certain rights over the IPs? You should have some of these thought out so that when you deal with research institutions, you deal with startups, tech developers, you know very clearly these are the boundaries. And of course, the data sharing policies and whether you have API development strategies to share data with startups. And finally, to the last slide, just to summarize, at least for MPA Living Lab, these are some of the key ingredients that we have put in place. We have innovation platforms to actually collect ideas and generate high quality problem statements, working through design thinking process, and channels to broadcast these problem statements to look for partnerships. We set up data hubs with APIs that allows us to expose the data, live data, for startups and researchers to actually work on their solutions. The third, which I talk about, is about the physical infrastructures, whether is it in terms of sea space, whether if you're ship owners or ship managers, what kind of environment you want to set up within your ships and within your shore command center, such as you allow innovations to take place alongside your operations people. And the last aspect is, of course, the regulations. This you have to work with the regulators to create the kind of enabling environment in terms of the guidelines and exemptions for drones operating in certain environment, certain time, certain space, and exemptions for innovations to take place. And I would just like to conclude that basically the Maritime Singapore welcome all maritime businesses from India and elsewhere, startups, researchers to form innovation partnership with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas Ting. It was, again, a very interesting presentation. And as you mentioned, thinking of setting up of Living Lab is easy. Actual implementation is where the challenges arise. But you have listed out the issues very clearly. And as when we start deliberating on Living Lab in a more detailed manner here in India, we would definitely like to have more insights from you about setting up of these labs here in India. India is a very unique. You have to think of researchers. You have to think of avenues to be created for researcher. You have to think of your seafarers and how to increase their capabilities and how to make them future ready for all the innovative new ideas that are coming from Norway and Singapore. Ultimately, these are will have to navigate and actually implement these technologies. And at the same time, we have a vast pool of human resource that is engaged in logistics trade without much of skill. And that is one segment which we keep on ignoring when we discuss our education and training and research. We have our last speaker who would touch upon exactly this issue of skill gap in the logistics sector and how do we bridge that gap. Mr. Captain T.S. Ramanujam is Chief Executive Officer of Logistics Sector Skill Council. He is based out of Chennai. Captain Ramanujam, I'm sorry, because of shortage of time, I'm not giving a detailed introduction.
Perfectly
but
fine,
your
thank you very much, Mr. Amitabh Kumar and Mr. Sharda Prasad, my esteemed panelists. I'll be very brief in my presentation. These are the content shows the heads that I will be covering the presentation. Next slide, please. These are the trends, which is well known to this very august audience. There's a growing importance on landside operations. There's a need to curtail the turnaround time of vessels, need to reduce the dwell time of cargo in ports, and there's an overall need to reduce the cost of operations. And all this necessitates optimization in yard management, quayside operations, and the direct port delivery, which the Honorable Prime Minister mentioned, is a measure in this direction towards reducing time and cost. Ports, they say, are as good as the interland connectivity, and therefore this necessitates stronger industry linkages. Already there are policies in place for this, and even if you see shipping lines, they are reaching out to the shipper and focusing on inland logistics. Next slide, please. Technology has created a need for greater visibility in the supply and distribution chain. All of us keep tracking any consignment, and therefore digitization demands that there be a mid-career training and assessment of the personnel. Sustainability of port operations was mentioned by one of the earlier speakers. This makes ports to rethink strategies, and therefore there will be much more of outsourcing to private operators, which again brings into question the skill of the manpower who are going to be involved. And energy conservation is indeed the norm. And as we, in the future, we have heard so much about autonomous vessels. I think even if you look at the trend, it's going to be larger vessels with declining crews, which means more shore jobs in terms of bunkering or other ship shore services. Next slide. So overall, what does it mean? There's a changed world of work at the ports. General labor has given way to multi-skilled and specialized workers. Labor-intensive operations have been replaced by capital-intensive operations. For example, even a small minor port would have a harbor crane there now. And even break bulk handling has become very specialized operations. For example, ship-to-ship transfers. Casual hiring is now gone. We have permanent outsourced employment. Semi-autonomous gangs, the good old stevedores, are now become more and more management-directed teams. And informal on-the-job training is now passé. We require certified, trained and certified workforce. And the predominantly male-dominated workforce of the dock worker has given way to a more diversified workforce. Coming to the logistics performance, if you look at it, for all the three categories, dry bulk, container, and liquid bulk, we still have some way to go as regards the vessel turnaround time. And if you look at the next slide, please, total manpower that's involved, which is about 1 million strong, and because this is maritime logistics has 8 subsectors which are very intricately connected, as you can see, and the total of 1 million staff would need to be kind of upskilled, skilled, and reskilled. So you know the quantum of work that is up against us in the future. Next slide. So what has the Logistics Sector Skills Council done is that we have created for the first time what's called the qualification packs for the National Occupational Standards. Mind you, these are all industry validated and line industry ratified, and they're all uploaded in the National Qualification Register. These job roles permit vertical progression and horizontal mobility for the candidates, and it permits them to multi-skill. And we are in dialogue with STC International Rotterdam for a parity which would make these trained certified candidates to be employed abroad as well. Next slide, please. So these are about 75 job roles which are there, which we have created in all the 8 allied sectors, which is available, as I said, in the National Qualification Register. Next. Some of the initiatives that we have taken is now using very low-cost Atmanirbhar simulators, which we are using now to train our crane operators for a very high-skilled job. So this is, as you can see, a rubber-tired RTG, a rubber-tired gantry crane operator being trained, and incidentally, the first batch has been trained, and they are now employed as apprentices in the DP World Container Terminal at Chennai. Next slide. Just before the pandemic, we took a milestone step of training the people on the river gauges, the National Waterway 1, on basic seamanship and safety. And in fact, so we had to train the trainer and thereafter impart training for the safety. And this is what Ms. Amitabh Kumar said about the reality of what is there in India. And in fact, one of the crew, can you just go back last slide? This man, he graduated from a pulling boat into a power boat. That itself, I would say, is a little achievement. Next slide, please. The Ministry of Ports, Waterways and Shipping has created this multi-skill development center, which is now run by All Cargo Limited, Logistics Limited in Bombay. And here we train people on all aspects of logistics. You can see the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana program underway, and 70% of it is practical. So this is, you can say, castor oil, the practical warehouse, practical training at the warehouse. And so that all these candidates become employable post-training. Next slide, please. We have taken a very innovative step, which, as the Vice Chancellor of IMU mentioned, the national education policy talks about apprenticeship-based undergraduate degree programs. We launched it in 2019, and this is Bachelor of Management Studies in Maritime Logistics, which we launched in American College in Madurai. It's a 140-year-old institution. And in fact, the entire curriculum content is developed by the industry. As you can see, Dr. Unnikrishnan, who was earlier Chief Manager Operating JNPT, is with us as a subject matter expert. This is what he has to say, that port sector needs new blood who are knowledge workers. Mind you, the word is knowledge workers, having high degree of domain skills and managerial qualities. And this program, BMS Maritime Logistics, will equip students to be ready for the quality employment. So this is what we have now launched. To conclude, the rationalized job roles that we have created makes these candidates employable across the entire supply distribution chain, and apprenticeship is a sure route for skilled human resource as industry gets an opportunity to see the talent. And I would request the industry in the same way to take up these candidates for apprentices, because these undergraduate students are now volunteering, coming on their own choice and not by default. Recognition of prior learning must be made mandatory for all jobs which involve safety. Next. Industry-led training centers need to be scaled up. This is a sure way of ensuring that the candidates are industry ready, and personnel trained here can definitely seek employment abroad, especially in the PPP operators who are operating the terminals here can well utilize these candidates in the terminals abroad. And finally, to conclude, in a deregularized ecosystem, post legislation of the major port authority bill, all other factors being equal, human resource is the paramount parameter for port productivity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain Ramanujam. We have had a wonderful session, full of insights from very eminent speakers. If we start the question answer session, I am sure we will need another half an hour or so at least. And we are already, we have exceeded our time by almost 40 minutes. So we will let go of the question answer session. There would be some questions, of course, and what we will do, we will list out all the questions and email it to you. If we receive the answers by tomorrow, we have our DGS pavilion where these brochures and films have been kept. We will keep the answers ready there for viewers who have to gain more insight into the talks that have been given by the speakers. Let me take this opportunity to thank all of you from on my own behalf and on behalf of Government of India to have spared your valuable time. And I know we are in 3 different time zones, and people do have lots of inconveniences and private commitments, which they compromise before to join a forum like this. Lots of wisdom has come in this session, and the industry per se, I'm sure, would be very enriched with the words that you people have spoken today. Once again, thank you very much. And if Mr. Shada Prasad wants to add to what I just said, Mr. Shada Prasad, please.
Thank you, Amitabh. I think it has been a very wonderful session, and you have already thanked them, so I don't need to do it separately. We have already overrun our time by about 43 minutes. So I would not like more time. Just wanted to thank all the speakers and the presentations which have been given. And I'm sure these suggestions will go a long way in improving the skilled manpower in the maritime sector, not only in India, but rest of the world also. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with that, we can close this session.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.